Hello, welcome. This is Jin. In this video, I'm going to talk about the RESTful API Essentials. First of all, what is REST and what is API? REST and API are acronyms for Repositional State Transfer and Application Programming Interface. REST APIs are essential to modern web and mobile application development. Every time you browse Facebook pages, send tweets, or use Google Maps to locate a restaurant, chances are these applications or websites are all calling RESTful APIs to fetch and update data. REST isn't a specific technology, but rather a data architecture and design methodology that produces predictable and consistent outputs and behaviors by receiving a set of standard method called verbs and returning standardized structured data, typically JSON and XMLs, called the resource. Repositional state transfer is a literal description of what is happening. We transition between repositions of states, and these repositions are transformed back and forth between the application and the server. Think of a typical website. Each page comprises a single HTML document that contains the content, and also any reference item like images, one or more style sheets describing how the document is presented in the browser, and some JavaScript manipulating the document, or the styles, or both. When the visitor navigates from one page to another, they send a URL or universal resource locator request to the server pointing at a web resource in the form of a specific HTML document. The server responds by returning the document along with the adjoining files to the browser, which replace the previous content with all the new content. This works fine, but is resource intensive. Each new page requires a complete HTML document, and all the documents has to be written by developers or generated by a content management system before it is downloaded and rendered in the browser. Now, imagine instead of a website comprising individual documents generated and downloaded from a server, we have a web application. An application downloaded to a browser that runs in the browser and is populated with the data from the web. In this application, each page is a view of representing the current state. When the visitor loads the site for the first time, all the components that makes up the application are downloaded, including an HTML framework, reference item, one or more style sheets, and some JavaScripts. The application then sends an URI or Universal Resource Identifier request for a web resource representing the next state of the application to be transferred, and use the resulting data to build a new curved view. When the visitor navigates from one view to another, the application sends a new URI request for the web resource representing the next state of the application, which is transferred and used to add, modify, replace, or delete the previous data. The key is this repositional state is transferred as a data object, not the entire new set of files, and the application can update its data without rendering the whole new page. This allows us to create so-called single-page application or SPA on the web and native apps for mobile device and platforms that all use or consume the same REST resource. To give a practical example, when you visit Facebook on your computer or your mobile phone, you use two different applications to access the same set of data from the same REST resource. All this back and forth is controlled through an application program interface or API. An API is a set of features and rules that exist inside a software program, enabling interaction between the software and other items, such as other software or hardware. In the context of the REST APIs, the API is the collection of tools used to access and work with REST resource through your verbs, including get, post, put, or delete. You can think of the REST resource as a librarian and the API as a language used to talk to them. Please pause the video. Can you think of two more examples of this application of the REST APIs? Very good. I think you got it. A REST resource enables access to a data but itself doesn't do anything with that data. To use a REST resource, we have to pass along instructions about that. What action do we want to perform? This is using HTTP methods, also called verbs. Anytime you use a web browser or or rather the browser use HTTP method to call the server at the other end of the URL, what types of requests is being sent? By far, the most common of this method is GET, which literally means get what is at the end of this address and send back to me. If you want to retrieve the data of the resource, you send a GET request. This request will either return a 200 OK HTTP status along with the request data, or a failure data, which is a 404 not found HTTP status if there's nothing at the other end of the resource or the resource is invalid. Post is used to create a new resource and often subordinate resource of the resource collections. For example, if you have a collection of products and you want to add a new product, you send a post request along with the data for the new products in JSON format, and the REST API creates a new resource under this product's resource and gives a new ID and resource URI. A successful post request returns a to1 created header along with a link to its new resource ID in the response header. If you don't have authorization to perform this action, you will get a 401 unauthorized status. And if the resource is already exists, the REST API returns a 409 conflicts HTTP status. And if the request is sent to the resource that doesn't exist for some reason, a 404 not found HTTP status is returned. Put and patch is used to update and replace data at an existing resource by replacing all of its content with the contents of the new request. Unlike post, which just containing the contents, a put request contains the ID of the resource and the new content to be added to that resource. If the resource is already existed, the existing content is replaced with the content of the put request. If no resource existed, the REST server may allow a new resource to be created with a user-defined ID. A put request sent to the singleton resource will return a 200 OK status on the success, or a 204 no content status when there's no content is present at the server. Also, for the failure, if you are not authorized, you will get a 401 unauthorized or a 404 not found status if the ID is not found. If a put request is sent to a collection of resource, a 405 method not allowed status is returned since put updates an existing singleton resource. Delete does exactly what it sounds like. It deletes the specific resource. Delete can only be used with a singleton resource. If you try to delete a collection of resource, you will get a 405 method not allowed status because you should not able to delete anything all at once. Okay, let's take a closer look of what is the REST verbs and the examples of the URLs. The common HTTP response message. The HTTP response status code at the top of the REST response header gives the client an immediate notification about the status of the request response pair. The client can use this response code to identify successes and failures and automatically responds with the next step. The HTTP response status code are split into 5 main categories and groupings. The 100 codes is for general information, and 200 codes is for success, such as 200 OK, 201 created, 204 no content. And 300 codes is usually for redirection, and 400 codes is usually for the client-side errors, such as 400 BAT requests, 401 unauthorized, 403 forbidden, 404 not found. And 500 code is for the server error, such as 500 internal server error, 502 BAT gateways, and 503 server unavailable. And there are more HTTP status message, but these are the ones you most likely to encounter working with the REST APIs. Now, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for watching.